Here is the question that separates leaders who understand the authority gap from leaders who actually close it. In your last meeting, how many topics did you speak on? Not approximate, exactly. If you do not know, that is itself a data point. You are contributing on autopilot. And autopilot is the proving reflex running without supervision. Understanding does not produce change. Practice does. The previous video named the proving leader pattern and the first behavioral target, a third less per topic. Now we move from understanding to execution with 2 exercises that target the proving reflex directly. One constrains your volume, the other changes what you do when you contribute. Together, they shift the operating register from proving to leading. Exercise 5. For 2 weeks, contribute on no more than half the topics in any meeting where you are not the primary decision maker. On the topics where you do contribute, cut your typical word count by 1/3. Not silence. Precision. Before the meeting, review the agenda and choose which topics genuinely require your contribution at the level your role demands, not where you have an opinion, where the room needs your perspective at your level. On the remaining topics, observe. Notice what happens when you do not fill the space. Notice who steps up. Notice whether the room functions without your contribution on that topic. These observations are themselves data about the team you are building. Picture a leader who normally speaks on 8 out of 10 agenda items, choosing to speak on 4. In one of those meetings, a direct report offers a perspective on resource allocation that would never have surfaced if the leader had spoken first. The team does not just fill the space, they fill it with thinking the leader was previously blocking by always being first to contribute. The key insight is that restraint creates room for the team to demonstrate capability you were inadvertently suppressing. The team was not incapable. They were crowded out, and you did not notice because you were too busy being the smartest person in the room. The question is not whether you said less. The question is whether the room leaned in when you spoke. When you contribute less frequently but at the right altitude, your contributions carry more weight. The room starts treating each contribution as a signal rather than background noise. Scarcity creates value in communication the same way it does in markets. One mistake to watch for: treating the half topics rule as a permanent constraint rather than a 2-week practice. The goal is to break the autopilot, not to permanently disengage. After 2 weeks, you recalibrate naturally because the pattern has become visible to you. Exercise 5 constrains your volume. Exercise 8 changes your mode. When someone brings you a problem, a direct report, a peer, a cross-functional partner, respond with a question before offering a solution. The question is, what options are you considering? The proving reflex fires at the moment someone presents a problem. The instinct is to solve it faster, better, more elegantly than they could. That instinct is the authority gap in real time. The question first protocol breaks the reflex at its trigger point. Instead of proving your competence by solving, you exercise authority by developing the person in front of you. What options are you considering? Does 3 things simultaneously. It signals that you expect them to have done the thinking. It creates space for them to demonstrate competence, and it shifts your role from solver to leader. Here is where it gets interesting. A VP whose direct report brings a resource allocation problem. Instead of solving it, the VP asks, what options are you considering? The direct report presents 2 approaches, one of which is better than what the VP would have suggested. The question first approach does not just develop the team. It changes the leader's perceived register from expert to authority. The room sees someone who develops thinking rather than replacing it. When the question does not surface a strong answer, follow a 3-step pattern. Ask the question, listen to their options, then and only then offer your perspective if needed. Notice the difference between "here is what I would do" as your opening move and "here is what I would do" after you have heard their thinking. Same words, different register. The first is solving. The second is coaching. One trap to avoid: asking, "What options are you considering?" as a test where you already know the right answer and are checking whether they get it. The team detects the difference immediately, and the test version reinforces the proving pattern rather than breaking it. The question must be genuine inquiry, not disguised examination. The meeting contribution tracker pairs with both exercises. 3 data points per meeting for 2 weeks. Topics contributed on out of total, whether you asked or told first on each contribution, and a subjective assessment of whether the room leaned in when you spoke. Track across 2 weeks. The data makes the pattern visible in a way that self-perception cannot. You cannot trust your own estimate of how much you speak. The previous video showed you why. The data is more useful than any self-assessment because it bypasses the perception gap. Exercise 5 constrains how often you contribute. Exercise 8 changes what you do when you contribute. Together, they shift the pattern from proving, which is high volume, solution first, expert register, to projecting, which is selective contribution, question first, leader register. Restraint handles how much you contribute. The next piece is how you structure what you say when you do contribute, because the way you sequence your message, whether you lead with data or lead with position, signals which register you are operating in. That sequencing is the difference between an analyst briefing and an executive communicating.